All right, we're going to do your quiz 10.3, 10.4 review. And the first page here, it gives you 4 problems and asks you to solve each by a different method, and it tells you what method to use on them. So the first one says by factoring. So when you solve by factoring, first you got to make sure you're equal to 0, which this is. And then you're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to equal this back number and add to equal the middle. So you can list some numbers out that multiply to equal -40, and you just stay patient. Eventually you'll come up with -8 and +5. So -8 times 5 is -40. -8 plus 5 is -3. Now, because these two things multiply to equal 0, either x minus 8 is equal to 0 or x plus 5 is equal to 0. And if this was true, we would add 8 and x would have to equal +8. If this was true, we would subtract 5 and x would equal -5. And that's it. So factoring is nice if you're equal to 0 and the equation is factorable. If you can find those 2 numbers that multiply to equal this and add to equal that, then factoring is really nice. It's the quickest of all the methods. So it's the one that I always try first, because if it works, you'll be done in just a couple of steps. Okay? But unfortunately, not everything is factorable, and so that's why we have to have other methods to be able to solve. Now, square roots is nice if there's only one squared term, and no other variable. So if you notice that, okay, I really just have this one squared term and that's it, then square roots is nice, because then you can just add 32 over. So you'll have 5x squared equals 63 plus 32, 95. Then you can divide by 5. You get x squared equals to 19. And then once you have that squared term all by itself, you just take the square root of both sides. The only thing you got to remember is it's positive or negative, both of those. So in other words, if I had the positive square root of this and I square it, I'll get 19. If I have the negative times negative squared would also give me 19. So I have to just remember that plus or minus, but that's also a pretty quick method. That if I notice that I just have one thing squared, then I'm going to use that method there. But if there's another x involved in this, then I have to consider something else. So come to this one, and I do have an x squared, but I also have an x. I can't use square roots. I can't find 2 numbers that multiply to equal 7 and add to equal 6. So I can't do factoring, I can't do square roots. So the nice thing about completing the square in something like this is if the first number is 1 and the middle number is even, then completing the square is kind of a nice way to do it if you know the process. So I have this front number is 1x squared, good. I have a middle number 6, that's even, good. Then I'm going to use this completing the square idea. We're going to subtract 7, put it over here. So I have x squared plus 6x equals -7. So that's step 1. Move that back number over, just get rid of it. Then we're going to actually do the completing the square, and to do that we're going to take half of the middle. So half of 6 is 3. 3 times 3 is 9. That's what gets added to both sides. So you got to make sure you add it to both sides there. Once you've done that, then what you did was you created a perfect square here. What 2 numbers multiply to equal 9 and add to equal 6? That would be 3 and 3, which we're going to really write as x plus 3 squared. So, we'll write that as x plus 3 squared, all right, equals -7 plus 9, which is +2. Now that I've got it as one thing squared, we're going to go ahead and take the square root. So x plus 3 equals positive or negative square root of 2. And then we're going to subtract 3. And we're going to just wedge that right in there. So -3 plus or minus square root of 2, that's our answer. Okay? Now, if you had to, you could take your calculator, you could go -3 plus the square root of 2, that'd be a decimal. -3 minus the square root of 2, that'd be a decimal. We're going to, on your quiz, on your test, I'm going to let you just kind of get to here and stop. So that's your process. Get rid of the back number, take half of the middle and square it, factor, square root, and then go to here. Okay, you'll be able to use your notes for any quizzes or tests, so just kind of have that process ready to refer to when you need it. Okay. Now, if we can't factor, and we don't have just one squared term, and we don't have 1 in front and an even middle number, then we kind of come to the last resort, quadratic formula. And the nice thing about this is it solves everything. Okay, there is no limit. So if you like quadratic formula, you could use it on anything you wanted because it's no limitation to it. All right, this is what we use when all other methods are unavailable. And again, it's not so difficult. You can have the quadratic formula there for you. It's opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You don't have to memorize that or anything. What you just have to do is know how to use it. So 3 is our a value, 5 is our b value, 2 is our c value. So it just goes a, b, c like that. Make sure any negatives are included in there. And then we just follow the formula. So opposite of b, opposite of 5 is negative 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared, 5 squared. 5 times 5 is 25, minus 4 times 3 times 2, all over 2 times 3. Okay, last thing I want you to do is I want you to actually go ahead and figure out what that is. So we're going to have negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 minus 24, which is 1. Over 2 times 3, that's 6. Okay, now, if that square root doesn't work out nicely, you'll just box that in. That'll be one of the answers you have to pick. But square root of 1 is 1, so we can go a little bit further here. Negative 5 plus or minus 1. So let's go ahead and do that. Negative 5 plus 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 divided by 6 is a negative 2/3, or negative 4/6 is fine, or negative 0.6 repeating, however you want to write it. Okay. And then negative 5 minus 1 is negative 6. Negative 6 divided by 6 is negative 1. So if it does work out nicely, we should go all the way down to here. But if not, we can do it. Now, because I get this probably was factorable. And if you would mess around with that a little bit, maybe you'd be able to get those same answers through that. But like I said, the quadratic formula, it's the same steps every time. So while it might look a little confusing at first, don't panic. It's something you should be able to do. So now we get to here, and we can solve these by any method we want. So the very first thing I'm always going to try is factoring. And I think about two numbers that multiply to equal 4 and add to equal negative 5. And I can come up with negative 1 and negative 4. And that means x could equal 1 or 4. If I put 1 in, 1 minus 1 will give me 0. That'll zero that out. 4 minus 4 will give me 0. That'll zero this out. So like I said, if it's factorable, boy, that's really nice, right? It works out nicely. If I come here, I try to think of two numbers that multiply to equal negative 8 and add to equal 10. I'm not coming up with anything. You can think about it for a while, and nothing's going to come up. So I don't have just a squared term. I have a squared term and an x term, so I can't do the square roots either. So I do have an even middle number and a 1 there, so I'm going to add that 8 over. I'm going to do this by completing the square. So I did this one here by factoring. I'm going to do this one by completing the square. All right, so now I'm going to take half of that 10, which is 5. 5 times 5 is 25. I'm going to add that to both sides. So 25 goes there. This then factors into x plus 5, or x plus 5 squared. 8 plus 25 is 33. All right, let's go ahead and take the square root. So x plus 5 equals positive or negative square root of 33. And the last thing we're going to do is just subtract 5 and wedge that right there. So x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 33. Okay, and again, that'll be the answer that you want to pick off of your choices on your quiz and test. Come to this one. We have x minus 3 squared. It's one squared term, no other x's. So we're going to do this by square roots. And what we need to do is get this squared term by itself first. So we're going to subtract the 10. All right. We'll have x minus 3 squared equals 22. All right. And then we're going to take the square root. So x minus 3 equals positive or negative square root of 22. And then we'll just add that 3. Throw it right in front. X equals 3 plus or minus square root of 22. So pretty quick. Just identifying right away that that's a square root problem helps out for sure, right? We get to this last one, not factorable, at least not something I'm going to try to factor. It's got something other than 1 in front, so I'm not going to do completing the square. It's not just a plain square term, so this one we're going to do by quadratic formula. So A is 5, B is negative 3, C is negative 4. So we're going to take the opposite of B, 3 plus or minus the square root of B squared. Negative 3 times negative 3 is 9 minus 4 times 5 times negative 4 over 2 times 5. All right, so now take your calculator and go 9 minus 4 times 5 times negative 4. And if you do that, you'll get 89 for your answer. And on the bottom, 2 times 5 gives us 10. So there's our answer. So on your quiz, you'll have some that tell you what to use, and then they'll have some that'll give you, choices. And so hopefully you know the difference. Why would I use one versus another? And that'll help you out.